Hi, this is Tony Northrup, and this covers Objective 1.3, which is Migrate and Configure User Data. This objective has three sub-objectives: Configure Profiles, Configure Folder Redirection, and Migrate User Profiles. So let's dig right into it, and let's take a look at an actual user profile. I'll use my own user profile in this case. Now, for the sake of the example, I'm going to take a look at my Windows 7 computer, which has just a ton of data, years and years old, so I've really accumulated a lot of data in my user profile. By default, Windows 7 and Windows 8 store user profiles on the C drive in the users folder. Each user gets their own subfolder within users, and that subfolder matches your username. So my username is tnorthru, so I'll open up my user profile folder here. Now within here you can see a ton of different subfolders as well as some actual files. Now you'll see some familiar items in here like my documents, my pictures, my videos. These are folders that exist by default, and they map closely to libraries that you can use to access those files. You'll also see things like desktop and downloads. Favorites, for example, keeps track of your Internet Explorer bookmarks. You'll also see some folders in here which you might not recognize. For example, application data and app data. Application data is just a shortcut that points back to app data. App data, if you'll notice it's grayed here, that means the folder is hidden. And if you dig into it, you'll see data created by individual applications. So if you save a file from Word, it probably goes into your Documents folder. But if you just happen to change some settings in, say, Google Chrome or Firefox, they'll save that in the app data folder. The app data folder is where applications get to save whatever data they want. Now, this is a fairly new innovation. This is something that's been around since Windows Vista, really. If you made an app for Windows XP, you often save this kind of data in the Program Files folder next to your app, or maybe you just pick some other arbitrary folder. Starting with Windows Vista, they were trying to tighten up security. So Microsoft implemented these profiles and made it pretty much mandatory that applications conform to it. So it makes a lot of sense. Apps basically now store everything they need in the app data folder, and as a result, you'll see just a ton of different apps saving files in this folder. So if we look in the Google folder here, you can see that Google Apps have made different subfolders for each different app that I might have used. And we can dig in a little bit and we can see different files representing the data that my web browser needs to store, cookies and state information and information about images that might be locked. So now we know what a user profile is. It's everything that makes your computer unique to you. It's your hopes and your dreams and your files and your pictures and your musics and your videos. So what's great about this is you can take your user profile, that folder, and copy it to another computer. And it's like everything you liked about your computer got transported over. Which brings us to our next demo, which is configuring roaming profiles. I just showed you a local profile, which are all the files stored on the local computer. And if you have a home PC, that's probably the way it works. Even if you're in a small business, you probably just have your files on a local computer. But in enterprises, administrators often want to store people's profiles on centralized servers. Whenever somebody logs onto their computer, their PC just connects across the network to the server and pulls all the information from the profile that it needs. By storing it on a central server, it's much easier for the administrators to manage because they don't have to back up every individual PC. All the user's data is stored on a server and it gets backed up really quickly, even if the user takes their computer home with them. So let's take a look at how to configure roaming profiles. This is a Windows Server 2012 Active Directory domain controller, and I'm using it to show you how to configure user accounts. So within the administrative tools here, I'm going to launch the Active Directory Users and Computers tool. This is where you'll configure user profiles. I'll browse down and find my domain user account. There I am. So here you see information about my account, and of these many tabs, one of them is called Profile. This configures where the user's profile is located. Now notice that it's completely blank now. If it's blank, Windows does what it does by default, which is to store your profile on your C drive within that user's folder. So if you just make a user account and you don't do anything special, the profile gets stored exactly where you'd expect it, even in a domain environment. If you want to configure roaming profiles, you'll go in here and type the path to a shared folder on a server. So it'll look something like this. Now, I just typed in an example, server/path, but we'll actually need to make that a literal folder. So let's create a folder on our domain controller and then share it. I'll open up Explorer here and create a new folder on the C drive. Now, I'm going to end this folder name in a $sign. When I share it, ending in a $sign will prevent it from being browsed. So basically, if you want people to be able to browse a folder, just leave it with whatever name you want. If you want people to not see a folder, but still be able to connect to it if they know the specific name, make the last character a $sign. That just hides it from people who would browse. It still allows you to connect manually to it, however. So I want everybody to be able to create their profiles within the profiles folder. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to be able to access each other's files. It just means that the first time they log on, they'll be able to create a new folder with their profile in it. Now, I use the wizard to share that, but let's go in and take a look at the advanced sharing just so we can see the permissions that you need. Here you can see everyone is granted not only change and read, but also full control. Full control allows users to change the file permissions assigned to folders within it. What will happen is that when the user first logs in, their computer will connect to the profile shared folder and create a subfolder for them and their profile. So they need to be able to not only create the folder, but set permissions on it so that other users can't access it. So this is correct. And our folder is now shared as profiles $sign. Now I can come back to my user properties dialog box and fill in the specific information. So the name of my server here is contoso.msft, and my path is profiles $sign. Now you'll notice a third folder here, and it's username surrounded by percentage signs. Those percentage signs are a special character that indicates that any words inside of them are a placeholder. So percent username percent happens to stand in for the user's name. So when my computer looks for a profile, it's going to connect to the server contoso.msft, the share name profiles $sign, and then it's going to look for the folder that matches its username because it's going to recognize this as representing the current user's name. When it doesn't find it, it'll go ahead and create it for me. That's all I need to do to create roaming profiles. Now that it's configured on the server, I need to go onto my Windows 8 PC, log off, and then log back into the domain. At that point, my computer will configure its roaming profile. So I'll do that now. This is my Windows 8 PC, and I will log off. And then log back on. And now that I'm logged on to Windows 8, my profile is automatically copied out to the server location that I specified. So let's take a look at the files on the server. You can see it created a folder for my profile when I logged on, and in that folder are all the subfolders that make up my user profile. Now, I also logged on as a different user. So I'm logged on to the Windows server here using my tnorthru account. I'll try to access the other user's profile, and you can see I can't access it. That's because when Windows 8 creates its own user profile on that server folder, it prevents other people from accessing it. After all, a user profile really should be private. That means other users can't access it, at least very easily. They'd have to elevate their privileges. Now, I'm logged on as a domain admin, and it's still not letting me get access to it. I would have to take ownership of it. This means that even as an IT administrator, you have to go through a very deliberate set of steps to access another user's profile. That's good, because even IT guys shouldn't have access to everybody's personal or confidential files. Now that we've demonstrated how roaming user profiles work, let's move on to the next sub-objective. For this sub-objective, we'll talk about how to migrate user profiles from one computer to another. There are several different scenarios in which you might do this. For example, if you were upgrading from a Windows 7 PC to a brand new Windows 8 PC, you wouldn't do an in-place upgrade. Instead, you'd take all your user profile data and move it from Windows 7 to Windows 8. You might also replace a user's computer. So if a computer was failing, or if they were just getting a faster computer, but they're both running Windows 8, you could migrate your old user profile data from Windows 8 to the new PC running Windows 8. So let's take a look at a Windows 8 PC and migrate that user profile over manually. So for the sake of this example, this will be my old Windows 8 PC, and as I jump to the desktop here, you'll see I have one document on the desktop, a test document. If we transfer the user profile over, we'll be able to see that that document made it and know that the transfer was successful. So to transfer a profile over manually, you can launch the Windows 8 DVD and go under the support folder here. We're going to use the Migration Wizard. The Migration Wizard is a tool that they include on the Windows 8 DVD, and it allows you to transfer user profile information over from just about any version of Windows. So you could put this into a Windows XP computer and follow the exact same process. Just run MigWiz, the Windows Easy Transfer tool will appear and walk you through it step by step. It's really easy. So this is just a wizard, and it's pretty obvious. Now they give you different ways to transfer your account information over. They sell this easy transfer cable, which is basically an overpriced USB cable. You can also transfer files across the network or transfer files using an external hard disk or a USB flash drive. Now, if your files are small enough to fit on a flash drive, that's probably the easiest thing to do. So we'll do that. So this is an easy question to answer, whether it's your old PC or your new PC. Now Windows Easy Transfer just checks out my profile and kind of compiles a list of everything that needs to be transferred over. Here it shows you how big it is. I don't have a lot in this sample profile, so I'll continue on. And you'll assign a password to it just because it's got all your personal information in it and you don't want anybody else to be able to access it. Now I'll select the drive that I want to store it on and click Save. And now Windows Easy Transfer saves those files. If you've been doing this for a while, if you have a huge profile, this could take hours. I literally have terabytes of data in my day-to-day user profile, so transfer like this can take a really long time. And when it's done, you can click Next. And it tells you that the file transfer is complete and reminds you where you saved it. So now I'm going to unplug that drive from this PC and move it over to my new PC. So here I am at the new Windows 8 PC, and I could probably simply repeat the process of opening up the Windows 8 DVD and running the Migration Wizard tool from there, but that's really intended for running from your old PC. An easier way to do it from the new Windows PC is simply to run the Easy Transfer tool. So I'll type easy here at the start screen to search for it and launch it from the apps results. Now, I'll also note on your old PC, if you don't happen to have a Windows 8 DVD to run the Migration Wiz tool from, you can just search for Windows Easy Transfer on the internet and you'll find links at Microsoft.com to download the tool. It's completely free and it runs on just about any recent version of Windows, including XP. So this wizard interface is almost identical. I'll choose to load my files from a USB flash drive. This time it's my new PC. And it's asking me if I've already saved them, so yes I have. And now I'll go ahead and select the drive that I saved them on and select the file. Now I need to type my password. And here I can select which files I might want to import. I could choose not to import them if I wanted, but I'll go ahead and let it import everything and click transfer. And that's it, the transfer is complete. You can see my test document appeared on the desktop, so everything was transferred successfully. This gives you options to see what was transferred and to see apps that were installed on the old PC but aren't installed on the new PC, so you can reinstall them. That's about it. Now, Windows Easy Transfer is the best way to transfer your files if you're just going from one PC to one PC. But if you're in an enterprise environment and you might be migrating dozens or hundreds or thousands of people from an old computer to a new computer, this would be really laborious and slow. Fortunately, Microsoft provides automated tools to do that. They're called the user state migration tool. So let's restart this PC to finish the transfer, and we'll take a look at those tools on our old Windows 8 PC. Now, the user state migration tool, the automated version of the Migration Wizard Windows Easy Transfer tool, isn't installed by default in Windows, so you'll need to download it and install it. It is part of the Windows ADK, which is the Windows Assessment and Deployment Kit. So if you look for that, you should be able to find it at Microsoft.com and download it. So this is just the setup wizard for the Windows ADK, and I'll go ahead and accept the default settings. Here, just make sure you select the user state migration tool. That's actually the only tool that we're going to need. You can see it includes 3 separate tools: the scan states tool, which copies all your files off the old computer, the load state tool, which copies your files into your new computer, and the USMT utils tool, which helps you manage these user files. It's going to take a while to download and install these tools. Once you download them once, you can just copy out those 3 tools that you need to any other computer, so it doesn't actually take any time after this. So let's fast forward through the installation of the ADK. So now the ADK is installed. I'll click close to close the installer, and we can find the path where the tools that we need were installed. Generally, they're hidden under Program Files, Windows Kits 8.0, the latest version, Assessment and Deployment Kit, and then User State Migration Tool. Now you can see we have both 32-bit and 64-bit versions. Let me just check which version of Windows I'm running here. This is the 32-bit version, which means I want x86. I know the naming is confusing. So here we see the load state tool and the scan state tool. Both of these are command line tools, which means you can run them from a script or from an administrative command prompt. So I will open up the WinX menu by holding down the Windows key and pressing X. Then I'll click Command Prompt Admin. This is just a really quick way to open a command prompt with administrative privileges. Now I'm going to switch into the folder containing those tools. To do this easily, I'll just copy this full path to the clipboard. I'll use the CD command, which means change directory, a quote. Then I'm going to paste it in there. In a command prompt, you have to click the box in the upper left, click edit, and then click paste. So because it's in quotes, it doesn't matter that I have spaces in it. And now I can check the directory for all executable files, and I will see the tools that I need: load state and scan state. Now, I will show you the most basic usage of these 2 tools, but if you want to explore them in more detail, it's really easy. Just find them on your computer and type the name of the tool, a slash and a question mark, and this works for just about any command prompt tool. And this lists every single command you can run with those tools. So as you can see, there are lots of things you can do, little ways you can tweak the operation, and there's no way I'm going to go over all of these, but I will show you the basic usage. And in an enterprise environment, the most common way to use it is to connect to a network drive and then copy your user profile information to that drive. Then you can go to your new computer and copy it back down using the load state tool. Now I'm ready to run the scan state tool to copy over my user profile to the folder that I've created on a server. I've mapped that folder as the M drive. So when you see me specify the M drive, know that that is a network server. The command is scan state and then the destination location that you want to save the file to. So it's the M drive. And I don't want to save everybody's user profile to the same folder. So I'm going to specify username here, and notice that I'm again using a variable username. This means I can run this exact same command on a different user profile and it will go into a unique folder with that user's name. This is really useful because you can save this command into a text file with a .cmd extension. That creates a command file that you can simply double click to run. So basically you're making a script that's portable from one user profile to another. I'll specify a couple of parameters too. I'll specify the L parameter, which saves a log file. I'll also specify the /c and /o parameters. The /o parameter overwrites an existing export if it's already there. That's useful because sometimes you run into a problem and you need to run scan state more than one time. If you don't have /o, then the command is not repeatable. And in the context of using it as a script, you really want it to be repeatable because you want another administrator to be able to run it more than once. The /c parameter just continues on if it encounters an error. Now, it will encounter an error if the user is logged on and has some file open. Even if they're just running Internet Explorer will have all these like temporary files open, and that will cause the whole thing to fail. So it's really important that you have the user close all their applications and files. Putting /c in there makes it a little more resilient. Those files that are currently in use won't get copied, and they're probably important to the user, but if they're just temporary files, they might not be. So make sure before you run this on a user computer that everything they love is saved. So I'll run this command now. All right, so we can see it copied over all my data. You can see there were a few migration errors. We can check this log file to see what the exact problems were, but I'm pretty familiar with this and I know they're simply temporary files opened by some part of the system and not anything you need to worry about. Now, before we go to the new computer to import that back, I'm going to make life a little bit easier, and I'm going to copy over the two executable files that I need to the shared folder where I'm storing the profiles. So because I'm already in the folder, I can look at the executable files by using the directory command, and I will simply copy them by specifying copy star.exe, which matches all executable files, and I'll copy them right over to the M folder. So let's switch over to File Explorer just to look at those files real quick. I'll just map it here because I had mapped it from within the administrative command prompt, which runs with a different set of user credentials. So now we can see the shared folder. It has the tools that I need to perform migrations in the root of it. And you can see because I created the destination folder using the username environment variable, it created a folder called tnorther. That's my username. I'll open it up. We see a subfolder called usmt. That stands for User State Migration Tool. Open it up again, and we see usmt.mig. That's a 70 megabyte file which contains all my user information. You can see it's identified as an easy transfer file. This is exactly the same type of file that was created with that graphical wizard that we made. The only advantage here is it's automated. It can be done from a command prompt, and therefore you can put it into a script. So let's go over to the new computer and we'll just reverse that process and pull the new profile in. Here's the new computer. I'm opening up the WinX menu and selecting Command Prompt Admin. Now, this is just a quick aside, but I'll show you how to map a drive from a command prompt. use the netUse command, specify the drive letter that you want, and then specify the path to the share. And you might need to specify credentials as well. So I ran netUse m:, and then the path to the share. This created a mapped drive labeled M that connects directly to the shared folder that I saved the files in. So now that I'm at the M drive, I can run the directory command and see the load state and scan state tools, as well as the files that I exported. Now I'll run the load states tool, specify the path, and specify a couple of parameters. As with scan state, I'll specify the /c parameter to continue if there's an error, but because you don't want to ignore errors, I'm also going to create a log file. You can see I ran into a couple of problems there. I was trying to run the 32-bit versions of the tools on a 64-bit computer, so let me switch back to the other PC and quickly copy those over. So here was my mistake. As you recall, I switched into the x86 folder. I forgot that I was moving from a 32-bit computer to a 64-bit computer. So I need to copy over the 64-bit files. If you recall, there's a separate folder called AMD64. I will simply copy that entire directory over to the M drive. Now I'll switch back to the new computer with those files intact. Check the directory here, and we can now see the AMD64 folder there. So now I will cursor up to automatically retype the commands I typed previously to pull up the load state command that didn't work last time, and I will rerun it. Okay, so the feedback here is it's telling me I forgot to include a parameter. This kind of thing happens. You run a command and it gives you an error message. You can recover from it easily. Generally just read the error message and interpret the meaning of it. You can see it's telling me I forgot to specify the LAC parameter, and there are actually a couple of parameters that go hand in hand, LAC and LAE. So I'll specify both of those, and what those parameters do is they create the local user account if it doesn't already exist. So we'll try that one more time. And this time we can see it's beginning the import. So in an enterprise environment, what you would do is you would take these commands and save them into command files. That's just a text file with a .cmd extension. You'd probably create one command file for exporting the user's account information and another command file for importing it back onto the new computer. Then you could just tell other administrators to run those commands, or you could just run them yourself and save yourself the trouble of typing it over and over again. You'll, of course, need to test it because it happens to everybody. You'll forget a parameter or you'll type something wrong and it won't work. Check your log files, make sure everything is going okay. Do it a couple of times, and chances are good once you do it a couple of times it will continue to go smoothly. So we can see from this last command here that the user information was imported successfully, copying that profile information from the server back onto the new computer. So now you've learned two ways to migrate user profile information from one PC to another. Instead of doing an in-place upgrade, you can copy all the user profile information to a brand new PC running Windows 8, either manually or in an automated fashion. So let's move on to the next sub-objective. Here we are in our Windows Server 2012 domain controller. The first step is to launch the Group Policy Management tool. The first step to configure folder redirection is to launch the Group Policy Management tool. Quickly, in an Active Directory domain, you can configure settings on every computer that's part of the domain by using Group Policy Objects. Group Policy Objects are stored on the domain controllers and automatically copied between domain controllers. Every time a domain client, such as a Windows 8 computer, starts up, it contacts the domain controller and asks for the latest group policy settings. The domain controller provides this file, which could have hundreds or thousands of different settings that make the computer unique to your organization. Now, domains can have many different group policy objects, but for the sake of simplicity, I'll just edit the default domain policy, which is applied to every computer that logs into the domain. The group policy management tool just makes it easy to find your group policy objects. So I right-click the object and clicked Edit, and that opens up a second tool, the Group Policy Management Editor. This edits a specific policy, whereas the Group Policy Management tool lets you browse the different policies that are available. Now, the settings that are relevant for folder redirection are located under Policies, Windows Settings, and then Folder Redirection. Here we can see a large number of settings to configure which folders users access for different typical subfolders within their user profile. For example, the most common is probably Documents. We'll open that up. Now, by editing the Documents policy, we'll right-click it and then click Properties, we can configure the location of the Documents folder to be a shared folder on the network. This is pretty amazing. What happens is when a user logs onto their computer, instead of storing their documents on their C drive, they'll be stored on a server on the network. That allows them to log on to any computer and access the files in exactly the same place, as long as they can reach that server. Now that sounds an awful lot like roaming user profiles, right? But it's not quite the same thing. With roaming user profiles, every time the user logs on, their computer contacts the server where the roaming user profile is stored and copies the whole thing down to the local computer. That works well if your profile is small. That works terribly if you have a terabyte of data like I do, because that would be a terabyte of data being downloaded every time you logged on and then re-uploaded every time you logged off. So what you do is use roaming user profiles, but then use folder redirection to store the local documents. So you can see as you view the document properties, you have a couple of different options. The basic option just points all the users to one server on the network. And the advanced allows you to specify different locations for different user groups. We'll keep it simple for now. Now, as you might recall earlier, we created a shared folder called contoso.msft profiles with a $sign to hide it. So I'll use that same location, and you can see that the document properties dialog automatically gives me an example of where a given user's files are going to be located. So if the user were named Claire, it'd be under my shared folder in the Claire Documents folder. That's going to be specific for that particular user. On the Settings tab here, you can configure a couple of other useful settings. You can grant the user exclusive rights to documents. That's enabled by default. That basically just prevents other users from accessing their documents, and that's what you want. You can also move any files that the user currently has stored on their local computer out to the new shared location. So you could clear this if you don't want to copy users' existing files over, but generally want to leave it checked so that users' files are automatically migrated to the new shared folder. There's also the policy removal setting here. At some point you might decide to remove this policy from users, and with the default setting, the user files stay on the shared folder. If you select this, the folder is automatically redirected to their local computer. Now what would happen is they wouldn't copy all the files automatically down to their local computer. They simply wouldn't be able to access their files. So generally you want to leave it to the default setting, which will allow them to continue accessing their files. Now there's another checkbox up here I didn't discuss. This applies the policy to computers running older versions of Windows. If you're only applying it to newer versions of Windows, which will be the case in most organizations, you should leave that clear. So I'll click OK to apply this setting. And I'll close the Group Policy Management Editor. Now the setting is active in the domain, and it's going to be applied to any new users that log on to their computer. So let's go over to the Windows 8 computer and log on as a new user. So now I will log on to my Windows 8 PC, and it's contacting the domain controller and pulling down the latest version of the group policy that I just updated. My PC will see that I created a new group policy, and it will create the necessary subfolders within the shared network folder. So let's go to the desktop and create a new file in Documents.
In the notification area at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that the user profile service is showing me an error. This pops up because my computer couldn't talk to the domain controller. I'm working in a virtual environment here and I don't happen to be running the domain controller now. So it tried to connect to my roaming profile, but the domain controller wasn't running and caused a problem.
Now I'll jump back to my server and open up Explorer, and we should be able to look at the shared folder profiles, and we'll see that it created a folder for my user account name, and in it we see the shared documents folder and the file I just created. Any new files will automatically go in there, allowing them to be centrally managed and backed up. Now, there's one other thing to think about when using folder redirection. You might want to enable the folders for offline files caching. Imagine that a user accesses their mobile PC at the office all the time, and of course, while they're connected to the local network, they'll be able to get to their shared profile folder to access the files that are actually stored on a local server. But now they take their mobile computer and they hop on an airplane and they want to be able to access those same files. If you use offline files, their PC will automatically copy files that they access. They can even configure offline files to transfer everything, but you have to turn it on first. So you want to right-click the folder on the server and then click Properties. Now in the Sharing tab, you'll click Advanced Sharing, and then on the Advanced Sharing dialog, click the Caching box. Now you see the Offline Settings dialog box, and this lets you control which files can be automatically cached or manually cached offline. And for folder redirection, my favorite option is the all files and programs that users open from the shared folder are automatically available offline. And you want to leave the Optimize for Performance checkbox selected. This doesn't force users to manually configure offline settings because honestly, most users don't understand offline caching. They want to just be able to hop on their computer and see that their files are there. And for the most part, if you select this option, you get the best of both worlds. Files are stored on the servers and accessed whenever the user has a connection. This allows you to back up just your server and keep all the user files safe. However, when they go mobile, they'll have a local copy and they'll be able to access it. And the next time they connect, any updates they make, Windows automatically synchronizes it with the server. I find it works really, really well. This is Tony Northrop for Train Signal, and I hope you found the lesson both educational and enjoyable, and I'll see you next time.